We are reconstructing a monster. It may be the greatest predator North America has ever seen. Its name is Acrocanthosaurus.
If Acrocanthosaurus were to magically come back to life, it would be a truly awesome animal. It was a giant killer. It could go after prey items that were 30 tons or more. This would have been the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the dinosaurs.
Now a monster is brought back to life, and a killing machine is put to the test. Monsters Resurrected, Dinosaur King. The Paluxy River, 1 hour's drive southwest of Dallas, Texas. Embedded under this gentle stream is the tale of a desperate struggle that took place 110 million years ago. These fossilized footprints are the Cretaceous equivalent of a crime scene. Hidden in this stone is the first-hand story of a savage past when megabeasts ruled the earth.
These footprints are direct evidence of an ancient combat between Acrocanthosaurus and its victim. It's the next best thing we could ever have to having a camera in the Cretaceous.
By unlocking this mystery, we can resurrect the past and bring a killer back to life. 110 million years ago, this was the coastline of an ancient sea, and much of what is now Texas was underwater.
The Gulf of Mexico basically came right up to here, and this was the coast.
And the mud of this ancient coastal flat preserved the details of what appears to be a hunt.
Right here we've got a real nicely preserved three-toed dinosaur foot. This cast was made from this footprint. You can see that the heel is not as well preserved because of the angle, but the toes are beautifully preserved.
These footprints were left by a vicious carnivore, Acrocanthosaurus. Acrocanthosaurus was over 12 meters long and weighed more than 4.5 tons. Even today, it would be a terrifying monster.
Imagine the panic if people saw a lion or a tiger walking free. Now blow that up 10 times or more in a creature unlike anything you've seen alive today.
As this footprint is examined, certain details emerge. The steep angle of the toe casts from the river show that the acro was running. But there is another set of footprints, and these second footprints are what make this discovery so amazing and potentially revealing. These second footprints are those of another huge dinosaur, a gigantic sauropod called Paluxysaurus.
Got a fiberglass cast of a sauropod left rear foot. You've got the ground level here, and you can see the claws, the heel. It just gives you a good idea of how much this thing should have weighed.
And the tracks reveal that the 36-ton plant eater was also in a hurry, as if it was being chased.
What we have here is a really nicely preserved set of sauropod tracks. It goes on for about 30 feet. The trail starts here with the right rear, and it goes this direction. There's a left, right, left, right, left, and finally the last one right. But it continues underneath this limestone ledge.
Did these two beasts just happen to cross each other's tracks? Or do the prints tell a more dramatic story? Professor James Farlow has no doubt they're evidence of a dinosaur battle.
Here on the left of the sauropod trackway, we see the three-toed prints of the meat eater. And it's going in a nice left-right sequence, pretty much hugging the left side of the sauropod trail, stepping in the sauropod footprints 2 or 3 times over the length of the trackway before it ends, and then the meat eater cuts across into the trackway of the sauropod.
When these tracks are plotted out, a pattern develops, and this pattern can mean only one thing.
The two animals are about as close together as they can be over most of the length of the trackway without physically colliding with one another.
The Acrocanthosaurus is trying to attack a beast 8 times its size. What kind of monster was capable of such an attack?
This was the top of the food chain, the king on this continent. And that's saying a lot.
Still, it's hard to imagine a beast that could routinely hunt a 24-meter behemoth that weighed 36 tons. But 110 million years ago, life on Earth was anything but routine. It was one of the hottest periods of Earth's history. North America was bursting with plants.
The seasons were probably split into a wet and a dry season. It was probably running in the 90s and 100s almost all the time.
Vegetation exploded over the continent. Tropical weather reached as far north as Alaska. Central Texas was a lush jungle, much like the Amazon, and the giant plants supported colossal sauropods, such as the 36-ton Paluxysaurus.
Acrocanthosaurus seems to have been a specialist in eating sauropods, these big, long-necked, long-tailed plant eaters. They were not bright by dinosaur standards. In fact, you can think of sauropods as basically big, dumb, walking mountains of meat. An Acrocanthosaurus probably needed to fill its belly at least once a week. That's a big belly. That's many hundreds of pounds of meat.
And for a ravenous carnivore like Acro, hunting giants looks like a clever strategy.
Acrocanthosaurus may have been the first big meat-eating dinosaur in North America that was specifically evolved just for attacking really large things.
But the mystery is, how did Acrocanthosaurus kill such mighty prey? Taking down a sauropod was an awesome challenge. And even though Acro's skeleton looks dangerous, it doesn't exactly shout giant killer. When it comes to deadly dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus Rex is the megabeast by which all others are judged. And the one we know most about. To find clues about Acro, we must start by comparing it to T-Rex. The two awesome predators look superficially similar, but to an expert like Phil Curry, their teeth tell very different stories.
This thing had an incredibly powerful bite. In fact, the most powerful bite known for any animal, living or dead. It was going after animals that were about its own body weight. And because they were relatively small, there was no way that Tyrannosaurus Rex could avoid hitting bone with its teeth. That's why those jaws are so powerful, why they could bite right through flesh and bone.
To understand the difference between T-Rex and Acrocanthosaurus, we have to recognize they have very different strategies against very different prey. T-Rex is up against smaller but a lot more sophisticated herbivores, and those herbivores have a lot of defenses. It's got to get past those defenses, get in there, and if possible, kill with a single wound. Crush through meat, crush through bone, kill with a single strike.
So despite its massive size and huge reputation, T-Rex was killing tough but small prey. By comparison, Acrocanthosaurus had narrow jaws with long, narrow teeth, more like knife blades than spikes. Phil Curry believes these were specialized tools for butchering huge, fleshy victims.
These giant plant eaters had giant bones. And if these teeth hit those giant bones, they would just break. What Acrocanthosaurus did instead is avoided those bones by biting much more shallowly. So it would take these jaws and teeth and use them like scissors, essentially, and slice flesh off on the side of the sauropods.
But it doesn't change the fact that compared to its prey, Acro was tiny.
Acrocanthosaurus's prey may have been big and dumb, but it certainly wasn't helpless, because by its sheer size, Paluxysaurus and other sauropods, they were dangerous just from muscle mass. If they chose to roll over on an Acrocanthosaurus, that acro would be an acro pancake.
It's a monstrous mystery. How did Acro kill giants like Paluxysaurus? To answer this question, we must recreate a crime scene. Examine the murder weapon and meet the killer face to face. We are resurrecting a monster. A 12-meter hypercarnivore. Fortunately for us, it's extinct. But it once terrorized the North American continent. 110 million years ago, this riverbed in central Texas was the scene of a fight to the death between two behemoths. Paluxysaurus, a 36-ton herbivore, and Acrocanthosaurus, a 4.5-ton predator. How could Acro tackle a beast 8 times its weight? To answer this question, we must reconstruct both the victim and the killer. Welcome to CSI Dinosaur. Acrocanthosaurus was armed with blade-like teeth and massive arms tipped with 200mm claws. They are the key to understanding how this monster killed. Once again, a comparison to the most famous dinosaur predator tells us a lot about Acro's weapons. Even though T-Rex was much larger, it was a weakling compared to Acro.
These are the arms of Acrocanthosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex. The big surprise on this, I guess, is that when you look at these arms, you would suspect this is from the bigger animal, this is from the smaller animal, but it's exactly the opposite. And this is the arm of a Tyrannosaurus rex. And Tyrannosaurus rex was probably 2 meters or almost 6 feet bigger than this Acrocanthosaurus. So it's clearly using its arm for something in a different way than Tyrannosaurus rex.
But the bones only tell half the story. Acro's arms were covered with muscle.
Based on the shape of this arm, I estimate the muscles are going to be roughly like that. It's almost 1 foot in diameter. This arm here could easily hold a ton.
Unlike T-Rex, whose arms were practically useless, the arms of Acrocanthosaurus were lethal.
Those arms are incredibly powerful and very, very heavily muscled. This would have been the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the dinosaurs.
Strength alone isn't what made these arms so deadly. They powered a set of giant meat hooks, 2 3-fingered claws, each tipped with sharp talons.
The claws of Acrocanthosaurus are clearly a major killing weapon. They're tremendously large. They're very well adapted to piercing into meat and causing serious wounds. If Acrocanthosaurus were to reach down and grab a human with its claws, those talons would go right through the torso. In fact, you probably would have one of those claws going in one side of the back and popping out the front.
With most meat-eating dinosaurs, the mouth and the teeth are kind of the business end of the animal, if you will. In many ways, the hand of Acrocanthosaurus is the business end of the animal.
But how can we determine how Acrocanthosaurus used these lethal weapons? Using castings from actual finger bones, animatronics fabricator Elvis Jones and paleontologist Dr. James Lamb have built a mechanical acro claw. Ballistic gelatin will act as a stand-in for the flesh of the prey animal. This material is formulated to simulate the density of muscle tissue.
We have the ability to slide forward and back to emulate not only his arms movement, which is limited, but also the momentum of his entire body running towards something. And so what's going to happen is this guy will slide in, slam down onto the jelly, and then we'll pull back.
Oh, good one. So it's really interesting. These two outside fingers have completely dug in all the way down to the bone itself. Now Acrocanthosaurus has sort of a grappling hook in its prey and can bring its mouth in to start doing some real damage.
And when Acro pulls those powerful arms back, the damage is devastating.
Oh, there we go. I don't know. I think that tells the story right there, don't you?
Yeah, that's a big chunk.
Clearly, these claws were deadly weapons when used against smaller prey. But just how could a 4.5-ton Acro kill a 36-ton sauropod? We know the Acro had massive arms and horrific meat-hook claws, but were these the weapons that it used to attack huge prey? For a predator like Acrocanthosaurus, the mid-Cretaceous was a brutal and dangerous world, a constant battle for survival. These huge creatures competed with each other for mates and territory. Even small prey, such as a herbivore called Tenontosaurus, could put up a big fight.
This is Tenontosaurus. This guy is half-grown in terms of mass. Its hip height of an adult would be up to about here. So in some ways, Tenontosaurus was sort of the cow of the mid-Cretaceous.
A fully grown Tenontosaurus could weigh almost 2 tons and measure over 6 meters in length. And even a lone Tenontosaurus was anything but a soft target.
It doesn't have armor and it doesn't have horns, so it can't fight back that way. But it will have its one major weapon, if you will. That's the tail. The tail of Tenontosaurus is actually one of the biggest and broadest tails among the dinosaurs. And a swap from that tail could certainly discourage, at least in the short term, an Acrocanthosaurus coming in trying to fight it.
Its tail versus 200 mil claws. But as we've seen from our mechanical reconstruction, these deadly claws ultimately give Acrocanthosaurus the advantage. However, exactly how would its claws work against a beast 20 times the size of Tenontosaurus? Here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Science, an examination of the Acro's biomechanics reveals a fatal flaw.
When trying to figure out the range of motion in an extinct animal, what you do is look at the shape of the joint surfaces. Notice we have a nice concave surface here and a convex surface here that fits into it. And so we can take this arm back about this far, before dislocation, and we can take it in front about that far before dislocation. Not an impressive range of motion there.
Acro's arms, while powerful, were limited. They could only move up or down about 25 degrees, and this would be a big problem when trying to tackle really big prey. Phil Center and curator Vincent Schneider have built a cast of the arm bones. They mounted them to a frame to approximate their height as Acrocanthosaurus reaches its prey. But seeing these arms next to the sauropod model makes Acro's attack look impossible.
Notice that as we move this into position and swing the arm as far forward as it can go, which is no further forward than this, the animal is not really in the best position to grab the prey. Notice how that the hands don't even come up to the elbows of the prey. And the same would work on the hind limb. The hands don't even come up to the knees. So, if you're an Acrocanthosaurus, grabbing your prey with your hands first, not such a good idea. You're going to get dragged.
Acro couldn't get its claws in close enough to fatally wound the Paluxysaurus. These massive arms and talon-like claws would be useless against the giant herbivore. They clearly weren't the killing tool. So what did Acro use to attack this huge beast? It had only one weapon left to use. A very deadly one. It may look like something out of a science fiction movie, but 110 million years ago, this dinosaur rampaged through North America. Its name is Acrocanthosaurus, and these fossilized footprints are evidence of a titanic fight to the death between this prehistoric predator and a giant Paluxysaurus. How did the Acro tackle this 36-ton Goliath? We've seen that its claws would be useless against an animal this size. So if Acro can't grab it with its arms, how could it overpower a creature 8 times its size?
It'd be like one of us, an adult human being, trying to take down a full-sized rhino with just our hands and teeth.
Paleontologist Jerry Harris has found a critical clue in some fossil fragments as to why Acrocanthosaurus was such a deadly killer.
These are a couple of the skull bones from Acrocanthosaurus, and you can see that they have these very large openings here, smaller openings that are tunneling into these various prongs sticking out in every direction. So most of the skull bones, at least on the palate and on the back end of Acrocanthosaurus' skull, had a lot of these big air openings. These bones actually are not big solid pieces of bone. The interiors of most of these, especially up in the head and the neck and going into the part of the back, were very spongy and full of these air holes.
And these lighter bones are found not just in the skull. More hollowed-out bones are found throughout the skeleton, making it light and agile.
So it looks like it would be very, very solid, and as bone would actually be heavy, but the interior of the vertebra itself is actually very hollow. Being lighter means you're going to have less food and still move very efficiently. You can also move very quickly.
The hollow bones also served as air channels, allowing Acro to pump oxygen throughout its entire body more efficiently.
Not only would it be lighter than you would expect, it would be turbocharged by this extra oxygen coming through the body continuously, making this one very impressive hunter.
Acro was strong, maneuverable, and deadly. A perfectly engineered killing machine with parts that fit together like a brilliantly designed weapon.
What we're looking at here is the second, third, fourth, and fifth neck vertebrae of Acrocanthosaurus. So the head would be fitting on right about here, and then the rest of the body would go off in this direction. What's very unusual about these particular vertebrae is that they have these big hollows on the backside and then these big processes that stick off the front. And what happens when they fit together is that these processes that stick off the front actually nest inside those hollows on the back of the next vertebra in front of them, the next backbone. And this helps lock the whole neck very tightly together. This is not anything like I've seen in any other animal. It may be that Acrocanthosaurus evolved these features specifically to help it attack large animals like sauropods, like Paluxysaurus.
Acro's neck structure allowed it to lock onto its prey like a pair of vice clamps. With its neck locked and protected, Acro could use its powerful jaws to tear chunks of flesh from its victims.
Now, one of the most magnificent features of Acrocanthosaurus is its skull. That whole lower jaw can fit within the entire tooth row of the upper jaw. And that gives the dinosaur a very scissor-like action as it bites.
At first glance, these jaws may seem dangerous enough, but science can now reveal just how deadly they were. Acro's teeth were perfectly designed killing tools, even on the microscopic level.
What you see on the screen is the rear edge of the tooth, and you can kind of make out the serrations that we see on the tooth. Now, these serrations act as kind of grip and rip structures. As the tooth is penetrating the victim, those serrations catch on to the muscle fibers and help to tear them and thus increase the severity of the wound. The teeth of Acrocanthosaurus are well constructed for cutting, for slashing, and thus ripping out big chunks of meat.
But to bring down a giant herbivore like Paluxysaurus, this walking weapon had to first get close enough to strike. And that's easier said than done.
In order for Acrocanthosaurus to kill a giant herbivore, it's got to go after some vulnerable spot. It's got to come up alongside the herbivore. It's got to seize it with its jaws, grapple with its claws, get in there and seriously wound that big herbivore. It can't hang on for too long, because if the herbivore rolls over it, that's one dead acro.
So how does the hunter get in close enough to kill without getting killed itself? The fossilized footprints that are here in Texas tell the story. It's a 110-million-year-old trail which spells out the secrets of Acro's hunting technique. The huge Paluxysaur is slow but not defenseless.
Going after a giant prey item is dangerous. So Acrocanthosaurus had to be pretty sophisticated in order to take one of these giants down.
The Acrocanthosaurus has huge, sharp talons, but we've seen that against a behemoth like this, they are useless. The Acrocanthosaurus is much faster, but its lightweight skeleton is also a handicap.
Paluxysaurus swinging its tail around would have been like swinging a giant 2x4 around, and with a lot of muscle power behind it.
One blow from this mega beast could knock out an acro.
The skull, as you can see, is made up of a lot of very thin, narrow bones. 5-ton of tail hitting the skull would literally break the face. With the face skewed to the side, this poor animal couldn't feed, and it would end up starving to death.
But the hunt still continues. As with many crime scenes, the footprints tell the story. You just need to know how to decipher the chase.
If we follow the trackway of the meat eater, the theropod, we have pretty good left-right sequencing of the feet. We go left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and then something odd happens, because here this right footprint is followed by another right footprint, after which we go back into good left-right sequencing again. So there is a missing left footprint right about here.
The fossilized footprints show the acro had to begin its attack from close behind its prey.
What had happened was that the meat eater, somewhere about here, had actually latched on to the plant eater, that it was attacking it and trying to slow it down. But it was being dragged forward by the greater weight and the greater strength of the larger animal.
The sauropod tries to wrench itself away, but the Acrocanthosaurus refuses to release its prize. The acro is clinging for life, hanging on only by the grip of its jaws. This might snap the neck of a lesser predator, but not the acro. This was an animal built for battle. Wounded, the Paluxysaurus weakens, and the Acrocanthosaurus now has the upper hand.
It's going to want to go for the soft portions of the neck. It would have enough power that it could, with its massive arms and its strong back and its great teeth, could probably crush the neck and drag an animal like that down.
If it could slice through the jugular, if it could take out the trachea, that big herbivore is going down. And it doesn't matter how big it is, it's going to be meat.
We got to remember that even though Acrocanthosaurus is a much smaller animal than the Paluxysaurus, it is still a very big animal. So if you pick a 3-ton animal up, lift it into the air, and then drop it into very soft mud, it should go swooshing like nuts and make the skid mark from hell, basically, as it's going into that print. The meat eater might have actually taken a bite of some sort of the plant eater, not enough to get dragged out of its feet and taking a hop. But if it had taken a bite, perhaps it's now slowing down afterward, and it's just going to follow the plant eater and wait for the bite to take its course to see if it has injured the plant eater enough that it can make another attack.
We've examined the weapons. We've deconstructed the chase. Now we must go back in time to the scene of the crime and witness a prehistoric attack and slaughter when we return. The stones have spoken. A 110-million-year-old attack and assault has been solved. Now we can finally see how a mega predator took down a dinosaur 8 times its size, recreating the entire struggle for life and death from beginning to end. Here, the fossil record ends. The tracks run out. But we know that the Acrocanthosaurus would not have given up as the odds were in its favor. But like all dynasties, Acro's reign of terror eventually ended. What could have toppled this beast from its throne? 110 million years ago, Acrocanthosaurus was the alpha predator ruling North America. But then, it just vanished.
What happened to it? Well, this all-American killer disappears, and unfortunately, it disappears into what's currently a mystery zone, a twilight zone of dinosaur history. We don't have rocks of the right age with dinosaur fossils to show Acrocanthosaurus disappearing.
If Acro was such an amazing hunter, why did it die off? This massive hypercarnivore may have been beaten by other predators. One of the greatest threats was a small but highly aggressive and vicious thief called Deinonychus.
This was a very, very deadly predator, even on its own. It's a very smart animal. It's got a very, very, very large brain. Also, recently discovered, it had an extremely good sense of smell. They have kind of short and stout legs for their size. But what they lacked in speed, they made up for in agility. This guy could turn on a dime.
A fully grown Deinonychus is just over 3 meters long and only weighs about 70 kilograms. But its size is deceiving because Deinonychus is a vicious whirlwind.
It's got lots of sharp teeth, it's got lots of sharp claws on its hand, and it's got a particular special adaptation on its feet, which made it a very deadly predator just on its own. If we look at the killing claw of Deinonychus, it looks pretty darn impressive. But an important thing to remember is that this is just the bony part of the claw. If you extend it out maybe 30%, that gives you a sense of the size of the actual claw that would be used to pierce into the flesh of the unfortunate victims of Deinonychus. It could stand back on one foot and use this counterbalance to keep it oriented properly without falling over so it could strike in with those arm claws and especially with that foot claw.
And Deinonychus could strike Acro where it was weakest, its unborn offspring. Acro eggs could be a prime target for this wily predator.
It probably would be able to go after those eggs and eat them so long as mommy or daddy Acrocanthosaurus weren't around to fight back. So a Acrocanthosaurus may have had to face Deinonychus even before it was born.
The ultimate giant killer was vulnerable, especially while sitting on eggs.
I'm standing next to a nest of dinosaur eggs that approximates that of Acrocanthosaurus in size as well as in shape and arrangement.
Acrocanthosaurus laid her eggs 2 at a time. She would have stood in the center of her nest and deposited 24 pairs in a circle. A mother acro would most probably guard her nest like a bird.
In fact, it's quite possible that the reason why there is no set of eggs here is that this may have been where she put her tail.
It wasn't any easier after Acro was born. That's why the eggs are shaped the way they are.
What I have here is a reconstruction of one of these eggs. And what would the embryo look like? Well, probably would look something like this.
A longer egg gives a young dinosaur embryo more room to develop. It was born ready to run.
Once it kicked its way out, it could scamper around in the underbrush and get away.
But mid-Cretaceous North America is a dangerous place for young acros.
Half of the young that pop out of these eggs are going to be dead within the first few months, mostly from predators. Might only be 1 or 2 that have survived out of a clutch of 48 eggs.
Yet if the young Acrocanthosaurus survived, Deinonychus would still pose a threat. By the age of 5, an Acrocanthosaurus is already nearly as large as a hippo, but this brash young hunter isn't big enough yet to scare away all rivals. And Deinonychus does not act alone. It hunts in packs. A juvenile acro would be at a serious disadvantage when faced with a team of highly mobile, acrobatic assassins.
Deinonychus was actually a powerful jumper so that it could leap onto the sides of prey items and grab on with these sharp arm claws to hold on. The jaws would be very useful for biting and slicing.
One-on-one, Deinonychus was no match for acro, but a Deinonychus gang could easily drive a juvenile acro away from its kill and steal its food. Scientists estimate that 65% of the acro population never made it to adulthood. But this low survival rate alone is not what pushed acro to extinction. Towards the end of its reign, there was a dramatic change in its surroundings, and crucially, in the food supply. The long-necked sauropods also disappear from the fossil record in North America at about the same time.
The problem that Acrocanthosaurus would have had is that without sauropods in North America, this animal wouldn't have been able to effectively kill animals smaller than itself. It really is adapted for killing bigger animals.
So what remained left to hunt? The options weren't appealing. This is Sauropelta. It's smaller and lighter than Acrocanthosaurus, yet this plant eater comes with some heavy armor. Sauropelta is like a 6-meter-long armadillo covered in rhino horns.
It's a walking tank. It has pieces of bone armor that are embedded in the skin, and it's going to stand there. Make sure the Acrocanthosaurus knows, I may be slow, and you may think I'm vulnerable, but I'm really not. I got these spines. Better be careful.
Meter-long shoulder spikes block Acro's attack.
These are huge things. At the base, they're at least this big in diameter. It's hefty bone. It's very strong.
Acrocanthosaurus was not designed to tackle small but tough prey like this. It was put on Earth to do one thing really well, to kill gigantic sauropod dinosaurs. And when its prey started to disappear, Acro's time was at an end.
While they were really good at taking down big lumbering giants, they weren't so good at the new wave of plant eaters.
Like so many specialized creatures, Acrocanthosaurus simply became obsolete. But before it vanished, it was one of the greatest big game hunters North America has ever seen.
Acrocanthosaurus has spent too much time in the shadow of T-Rex. It's a cool dinosaur on its own. It's big, it's impressive, lived all over America, and it was a giant killer. And I think it's about time that we bring Acrocanthosaurus back and more people get to see this dinosaur resurrected.